Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside. The voice was clipped, not rude exactly, but sharpened just enough to slice through the low ambient hum of private terminal chatter. Janelle Carter had just handed over her boarding pass, still warm from her fingers when the gate agent, a white woman in her early 30s, navy uniform pressed razor sharp, let the paper hover in midair without scanning it. "I'm sorry," the woman added, brows furrowed with artificial concern, "but this cabin is reserved for first-class executive-tier guests only, and you're not listed." Her tone was the kind reserved for people who were clearly in the wrong place, but didn't know it yet. Janelle didn't blink, she didn't flinch, didn't huff, didn't explain. She simply tilted her head just a fraction and said calmly, "Would you mind verifying the name on the pass?" The agent, her nameplate read M. Halstead, didn't even look down. Instead, she looked past Janelle as if someone would suddenly appear to escort this obvious mistake away. A mistake in a cream trench coat, black trousers, and pearl earrings. Subtle but expensive. Understated in all the right ways. Janelle Carter didn't look like someone trying to prove anything, which, of course, made it worse. "I'm asking you to step aside while we finish boarding," Halstead repeated, firmer now. "We'll have someone escort you shortly." A beat. Janelle's eyes scanned the gate. Empty seats. A private boarding door, a single line forming behind her, where two men in gray suits began whispering. One of them, a lanky, silver-haired man with a laptop bag slung over his shoulder, muttered just loud enough for someone to hear, "Every week it's someone new thinking they can just walk onto a Nova Sky flight." The other chuckled. She probably booked economy and thought no one would notice. Janelle heard it all. She didn't turn. Halstead looked down at the boarding pass finally, still not scanning. "Janelle Carter," she read slowly. Yeah, I don't have that name here, so either this was issued in error or, Janelle asked, evenly. Halstead's smile turned tight. "Or someone tried to pull strings." Janelle breathed in through her nose, slowly. A young man, maybe in his 20s, wearing a Nova Sky ground crew badge, stepped toward the desk from the side hall. He looked between them, uneasy. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, mostly to Halstead. "She's not on the manifest," Halstead snapped before Janelle could respond. "We're paging security." The young man looked at the pass in Janelle's hand. His eyes widened. "Wait," but Halstead raised her hand, silencing him. "I said we'll handle it. You're on refuel detail, not passenger clearance." The young man hesitated, then turned away reluctantly. Across the boarding lounge, an older black woman in a crimson shawl paused mid-conversation and watched. Her expression shifted, not surprise, not outrage, just recognition. She'd seen this before. Many had, a quiet smothering. Not violent, but pointed. Not, "You don't have money," just, "You don't look like you belong in money." Behind Janelle, the suits got bolder. "She's still standing there? Probably thinks Carter means something." Janelle turned slightly toward the gate agent and spoke softly, almost conversational. "I'm not going to ask again. Please scan the boarding pass." Halstead folded her arms. "Ma'am, unless you have an executive-tier clearance, we can't allow you to board this flight. This is a Nova Sky signature class route. That means vetted passengers only, no exceptions." Janelle said nothing, just reached into her leather bag, smooth, structured, the kind that whispers custom with every seam, and pulled out a phone. She didn't dial, she tapped once. A voice answered on speaker. "Yes, Ms. Carter. Begin documentation," Janelle said calmly. "Already recording." Halstead's face twitched. "Excuse me, but what are you—" Janelle didn't raise her voice. "You've denied me boarding on a Nova Sky executive route. You've publicly questioned my credentials, refused to verify the boarding pass issued by your own system, and have threatened to call security." The suits fell silent. One took a step back. The crimson shawl woman stood up. "Ma'am," Halstead started, suddenly less sure. But Janelle had already stepped forward, voice smooth as satin. "Let's be clear, I'm not asking for a seat. I own the seat, along with the jet, along with the rights to this flight path." She turned toward the murmuring voices behind her. "And if anyone here would like to keep their job, I suggest you confirm that with corporate in the next 30 seconds. Dead silence. The gate's PA system chimed, then cut off. "Now hold up. What just happened? A black woman? Calm, poised, not yelling? Just got told she didn't belong. Then she made one call, and now an entire airline's about to feel the turbulence. But we're only getting started. Before we dive deeper, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if this story already has you leaning forward, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. These stories need ears like yours. Because in the next chapter, someone's job gets suspended, and it's not Janelle's. "You're saying her name was there yesterday?" Chloe Daniels whispered, eyes wide as she stared at the printed manifest in her trembling hands. Darius Lee didn't answer right away. He reached into his Nova Sky jacket pocket and handed her a second sheet of paper, thinner, warmer, fresh from the ops printer. "Right here," he pointed, finger tapping a line near the bottom. "Seat 1CJ. Carter, confirmed. And now?" Darius gave her a look. "Now? It's gone?" Chloe looked back toward the gate, where Janelle Carter stood unmoved, regal, still. But the room around her had shifted. Voices had dropped, glances had sharpened. No one had escorted her off yet, but no one had welcomed her either. Elaine Prescott, the on-duty operations manager, had just arrived, and she wasn't hiding her irritation. "She's still here," Elaine barked, marching past the gate desk. Her coat was still on, sunglasses hanging from her blouse like she had better places to be. "What part of unlisted do you not understand?" Halstead, the gate agent, straight. "I told her she's not cleared for boarding. She's making calls, recording things." Elaine snorted. "Of course she is." She turned toward Chloe. "Have you verified the manifest?" "Yes, ma'am," Chloe said, her voice tight. But, Elaine raised an eyebrow. "There's a discrepancy," Chloe said carefully, glancing toward Darius. "The backup file from yesterday listed a J. Carter in 1C. Elaine didn't miss a beat. "Then it was corrected. Probably a clerical error, or a last-minute downgrade. These things happen. Doesn't mean anyone gets to play pretend at being elite." That last line hit the air hard. Darius flinched. So did the woman in the red shawl, now seated just beyond the velvet ropes, her tea untouched. She hadn't taken her eyes off Janelle since the moment she was stopped. Janelle hadn't moved. She didn't have to. Her silence had its own gravitational pull now, quiet, composed, and heavy. From the corner of the room, a middle-aged Indian businessman stood up. His voice was soft, but clear. "Excuse me," he said, "just so I understand. Is this an issue of security clearance or a tech error?" Elaine turned, all polite tightness. "We're handling it, sir." "I'm sure you are," he replied. "It just seems unusual to remove someone's name without notification, especially on a first-class route." Elaine's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Our priority is the safety and discretion of all our passengers." The businessman nodded once, but his face told another story. He wasn't convinced. Neither were the two college-age passengers scrolling Twitter with one hand and filming with the other. Back at the desk, Chloe leaned in closer to Darius. "She doesn't seem like someone who just booked wrong, you know." Darius kept his voice low. "That's because she didn't." Chloe turned sharply. "Wait, do you know who she is?" Darius hesitated. "I think so," he whispered. "I saw her once, last year, corporate walkthrough. She didn't talk much, but the VP of Fleet stood when she entered the hangar." Chloe's eyes widened. "Are you saying she's—" "I'm saying we're treating someone like she's nobody when she might be the somebody. They both looked over at Janelle, still standing, still watching, and still waiting. Inside the gate control room, Elaine pulled Chloe aside. "I need you to stop digging," she hissed. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. But I think, no. You're new here, let me give you some advice. People show up all the time claiming to be important. Trust me, if she really belonged in that seat, her name wouldn't just vanish." Chloe hesitated. Elaine softened her voice, conspiratorial now. "Besides, you know how this works. The system has its ways of weeding out performance entries. Especially lately, especially with all these DEI hires floating around." Chloe's jaw locked. She stepped back without saying a word. Elaine didn't notice, or didn't care. She turned toward the desk, ready to page security, but before she could speak, Chloe reached for the intercom mic and cut the line. Elaine turned, furious. "What are you doing?" Chloe looked at her, voice steadier than she felt. "I'm asking a question." She turned to Janelle. "Miss Carter, did you book under your full name or initial?" Janelle looked at her, finally, and for the first time she smiled. Small, almost imperceptible. "Initial, as always." Chloe nodded, voice trembling but audible. "Then someone changed it." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Elaine froze. Daria stepped forward, holding up the printed manifest. The update timestamp was at 2:14 a.m. yesterday. No one schedules name removals at that hour. The businessman in the corner raised his brows. The red shawl woman crossed her arms. And the two suits who'd whispered earlier? They sat down. Slowly, Elaine tried to recover. "We don't have confirmation of anything yet. For all we know, this could be a clerical error or sabotage," Darius finished. No one laughed. Chloe took a deep breath. She looked back at Janelle. "I don't know what's happening," she said softly, "but I think someone doesn't want you on this flight." Janelle finally stepped forward, just once. "Then I think," she said, voice smooth as velvet, "it's time we find out why. Something's not right. The boarding pass, the late-night system change, the fear in the staff's eyes." And Janelle? She's not surprised, because when systems are designed to exclude, their first tactic is to erase. But this story's just warming up. Next chapter, someone confesses, and a name reappears where it was never supposed to be removed. Chloe Daniels didn't realize she was holding her breath until the door clicked shut behind her. Elaine Prescott stood by the small window in the operations office, arms crossed tight like she was bracing against a storm no one else could feel. She didn't turn. She didn't have to. "You want to tell me what that little performance was out there?" Elaine's voice was light, almost amused, like a mother talking to a disobedient child. Chloe kept her voice steady. "I asked a question." Elaine finally turned. "You questioned the system in front of passengers on a first-class route." Chloe shifted her weight. "But the system was wrong. Her name was there." Elaine sighed, like she was exhausted from having to explain things to people who didn't know their place. That's the thing about systems, Chloe. They don't make mistakes, not unless someone high enough tells them to. She walked over to a locked drawer, pulled out a file, and opened it with a single practiced flick. "You see this line right here?" she said, tapping a printout with one long polished nail. "That removal wasn't some glitch. That was updated manually, came from a very specific clearance level, which means someone wanted it gone." Chloe stared at the line. "Who?" she asked softly. Elaine shut the folder. "That's not your concern, and if you want to keep flying, you'll stop asking." In the break room, Darius Lee leaned over a monitor while his friend, a soft-spoken IT tech named Miles, scrolled through the flight's digital logs. "So," Darius asked, "can you tell where the order came from?" Miles squinted, then leaned back. "Yeah, It didn't come from the gate team, or even the ops office. Darius frowned. Then from where? Miles tapped the screen. From the top, man, like boardroom level. Darius blinked. Like corporate? Miles nodded slowly. Yeah, someone way up. Someone with clearance most people don't even know exists. He paused. And get this, the same access code that removed her name? It's been used before, only on passengers flagged as media sensitive, like celebrities, whistleblowers, and company risks. Darius looked down, then toward the window, where Janelle still stood in silence. Back at the gate, tension buzzed like static. Janelle hadn't moved, but her stillness was louder than shouting. A woman in a red shawl, the same one who'd been silently sipping her tea, finally stood. Her voice was calm, but steel-cut. I've flown Nova Sky long enough to know when something smells off, and right now this isn't about a boarding pass. This is about erasure. Olsted, the gate agent, looked away. Two passengers nearby, one filming, one whispering, stopped pretending they weren't watching. Moments later, Chloe emerged from the operations office. Her face was pale, but her voice was calm. She walked up to Darius and handed him a folded paper. Low, like a secret. She's not making this up, Chloe whispered. That removal? It was ordered, not from here, from way up. Darius opened the paper just enough to see one sentence near the top. Not a signature, not even a full name, just initials. R.M. Janelle's phone buzzed. She tapped it once and spoke without raising her voice. Add the name R. Mitchell to the record, she said. Flag for internal review. Logged, the voice on the other end replied. And notify compliance. I want the full chain of access requests for this flight and I want it today. Understood. Janelle looked up. Elaine had gone stiff. Halstead froze, and the people watching, they didn't see a woman waiting anymore. They saw a storm coming. Her name was removed, her presence ignored, and someone powerful tried to erase her without making a sound. But now, Janelle Carter is done waiting. In the next chapter, someone will confess, and someone else will realize they've been standing on a trapdoor. The intercom crackled. Final boarding call for Nova Sky Executive Charter 911 to Montreal. All passengers, please be seated. The jet engines began to stir, a low hum vibrating through the glass walls of the private terminal, as if the flight itself was holding its breath. But Janelle Carter still stood, alone, calm, unmoved. Across the gate, Elaine Prescott watched her with arms crossed and a smile that didn't match the tension in her jaw. She's delaying the flight, Elaine said to no one in particular, but loud enough for everyone to hear. We can't move forward until this passenger is cleared. She didn't say Janelle's name, but she didn't have to. Whispers stirred through the lounge like a breeze cutting through still air. Some heads turned. Others didn't bother hiding their stares. One man, seated near the window, leaned over to his wife and muttered, "If she's not even verified, why is she still standing there like she owns the place?" Elaine heard it. She smiled wider. Behind the desk, Halstead tapped at her tablet unnecessarily loud, then turned to Chloe. "I've submitted a security escalation," she said flatly. "They'll be here in 5 minutes." Chloe didn't respond. She just glanced at Janelle, who hadn't moved a step. Then, quietly, Janelle spoke. Her voice wasn't raised, but it reached the room like it had been waiting for silence. "I'm not asking for special treatment," she said. "I'm asking for transparency." No one interrupted. "I was issued a boarding pass," she continued. "It was removed from the system without explanation. And instead of addressing that, I've been accused, dismissed, and now labeled a disruption." She paused. "I'm not here to disrupt. I'm here to fly." Somewhere in the lounge, a seat creaked as someone shifted uncomfortably. Elaine cleared her throat. "Ms. Carter." Janelle raised a hand gently, not to silence, just to signal she wasn't finished. "This isn't about a name on a screen," she said. "It's about who gets to be believed and who gets erased without question." The woman in the red shawl stood again, this time walking forward with slow, deliberate steps. "I'd like to say something," she said. Her voice was soft but had the weight of years behind it. Elaine tensed. "Ma'am, please remain seated." "I've remained silent long enough," the woman replied. Then she turned to face the room. "I've flown this airline more times than I can count. I've seen policies in force, yes, but I've also seen how policy becomes an excuse when someone doesn't look like they belong. And right now, that's what's happening." She looked at Janelle. "You don't need to prove anything, sweetheart. Your calm says everything." Near the back, a young Asian man in a blazer raised his hand slightly. "Excuse me," he said to the staff, "but can passengers request to see the boarding manifest, or at least confirmation that this is a technical issue and not personal?" Elaine's face flushed. "Our systems are private," she snapped. "This is not a town hall meeting." Halstead added stiffly, "We're following protocol. No one is being targeted." Janelle tilted her head. "Then let's review the protocol," she said, "because according to Nova Sky's own public terms, a guest with an issued pass and matching ID has the right to a verification process before being denied access." Chloe blinked. That was true. She'd read the handbook in training. Eileen's mouth opened, then closed. Janelle turned slightly toward her, voice still even. "If that step was skipped, then we're no longer talking about procedure, we're talking about exclusion. And if that's what's happening, then I will make sure every second of it is documented and reviewed." Halstead looked toward Elaine, nervous now. Elaine held her ground, barely. "If you continue to interfere, Ms. Carter, we will have no choice but to remove you." Janelle smiled faintly. "You already tried, digitally." Someone exhaled sharply. The man with the blazer glanced down at his phone. "This is going viral," he whispered to himself. At the gate desk, Chloe leaned toward Darius and whispered, "She knows the policies better than Elaine." Darius nodded. "She speaks like someone who's been in that boardroom." Chloe swallowed. "You don't get that calm by accident." Then Janelle's phone vibrated once. She tapped it, put it to her ear. "Yes." A pause, then she said clearly, "Hold security dispatch. I'm still gathering statements." She hung up slowly, then looked back at Lane. "You're escalating this, not me. All I've done is stand, speak, and wait." Another pause. "But if you force this flight to leave without me, I promise you it won't land with the same crew." Gasps. Real ones this time. Elaine went pale. Engines started, doors began to close, but something stronger was keeping this jet grounded. Not protest, not resistance, just one woman standing in the truth and refusing to be moved. In the next chapter, a confession breaks the silence, and a system begins to shake. Chloe Daniels had never heard her own heartbeat this loud before. It pounded in her ears like a second voice, a warning, a countdown, a choice. She was standing behind the gate desk again, eyes darting between two screens, the passenger manifest and her inbox. Both looked the same, but something was wrong. Terribly, precisely wrong. There, between the lines, sat a note she hadn't noticed before, hidden under system tags, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Case Carter. Initiate silent retraction. Do not escalate if challenged. Flag as media sensitive, no response required if questioned. No name, no title, just a trail, meant to be buried. And now she had seen it. A soft voice behind her pulled her back to reality. "Chloe," Janelle said gently, "when you scanned the boarding pass earlier, did my name appear? Not angry, not accusing, just asking." Chloe's mouth opened, closed. Her hands trembled on the edge of the desk. Elaine was watching from the side, jaw tight, nails clenched in her palm. Janelle didn't repeat the question. She just waited. Chloe glanced down and looked at Janelle. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Yes. The lounge went still. Then, a voice from the back, the businessman in the blue blazer, cut through the silence. Wait, did she just say the name was there? Chloe looked at him, then back at Janelle. It was there. Yesterday's backup file had her listed. This morning, it was gone. She paused. It didn't disappear on its own. Elaine stepped forward fast, too fast. That's speculative, she snapped. Chloe isn't trained to interpret system flags. That note, whatever she saw, could have been archived, could have been old, but it wasn't, Chloe said, voice firmer now. It had today's date, and someone with authority changed it. Halstead muttered under her breath. Oh my God. The red shawl woman stood again, arms folded. Now we're talking. Janelle still didn't move. She didn't even blink. Her hands rested calmly at her sides. Darius turned to Chloe, eyes wide. Are you sure? Chloe nodded. It's not a glitch. Somebody changed it. Elaine's face flushed with color. I'm warning you, but Janelle cut in gently. Are you? Elaine froze. Janelle took a step forward. I want to be clear, she said. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't caused a scene. I've followed every rule you've asked of me. She glanced at Chloe. And now, we all know I was listed and I was removed. She turned toward the watching passengers. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. A pause. Then the older man in the back, the one who'd been silent this whole time, stood. I don't know who you are, he said, but I've flown enough to know this isn't normal. He looked at Elaine. And if someone did remove her, why not just fix it? Why not just admit it? Elaine swallowed. Sir, we're handling this internally. No, you're burying it, the woman in red said flatly. And this time someone dug it up. Chloe stared at her hands, then at Janelle. I didn't know who you were, she said softly, but you stood there like you weren't scared, and I realized. She stopped, then started again. I realized the only reason someone would try that hard to erase you is if you mattered more than they wanted to admit. Janelle smiled, not smug, not victorious, just relieved. She turned back toward Elaine. I'm not asking for an apology, she said. I'm asking for accountability. Elaine didn't speak. Couldn't. She just stepped back, half an inch, but enough for everyone to see. This wasn't a glitch. This was a choice. And someone, finally, said it out loud. In the next chapter, Janelle stops asking, and for the first time, someone follows her orders. The gate had gone quiet. Not silent, but that kind of quiet where every sound gets sharper. The clack of someone setting down their phone, the creak of a leather briefcase, the slow zip of a purse being closed. Like the world was leaning in to listen, and in the middle of it, Halstead stood behind the counter, barely breathing. Chloe leaned toward her. Who sent it? She whispered. The email. The one that told you to block her. Halstead's lips trembled. I don't know, she whispered back. It came from ops, but I didn't question it. I thought it was security protocol. Chloe pressed gently. Do you still have it? Halstead hesitated, then reached into her inbox, tapped, scrolled, and there it was. The subject line was short, cold. JC, do not board, forwarded for action only. No greeting, no explanation. At the bottom, just 2 letters. RM. Darius glanced over Chloe's shoulder. Read it, then nodded, grim. This isn't from someone low level, he said under his breath. This came from someone who has pull. And fear. Chloe looked at Halstead again. You knew something was wrong, she said. Didn't you? Halstead nodded. Just barely. I didn't think it would go this far, she murmured. She wasn't supposed to fight back. At the center of the lounge, Janelle Carter hadn't moved. But she didn't need to, because now the room was orbiting her. She took one step forward and every eye followed, not because she was loud, but because she was clear. She looked at Elaine, calm, measured. "If I weren't here," Janelle said, "and you were in a boardroom and a passenger's name had been removed without record, what would you recommend, Miss Prescott?" Elaine blinked. Janelle continued, "Would you advise a quiet fix, an apology, or a review of who made that call?" Elaine didn't answer, not because she refused, but because she couldn't. Janelle turned, not dramatically, just thoughtfully, toward the rest of the room. "And what about the rest of you?" she asked, not accusing, just inviting. "If this wasn't me, if it was your mother, your sister, your daughter, and her name was quietly erased, what would you want done?" No one spoke right away. Then the woman in the red shawl, steady and elegant, nodded once. "I'd want answers," she said, "and I'd want them now." A sniffle broke the air. It came from a young woman in the corner, barely in her 30s, curly hair, gold hoops. She was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "I've been through this before," she said softly. "Not on a plane, a hotel, booked, paid, but when I got there, suddenly, no record." She looked up at Janelle, and I knew what it was. "But they just smiled, said it was a mix-up?" Janelle met her gaze, and for a second, neither of them needed words. Elaine's voice cracked like dry wood. "I didn't create this," she said, louder than she meant to. "I just did my job." Janelle turned back. "You enforced the deletion. I followed the system," Elaine snapped. "No," Janelle replied, her tone like silk pulled tight. "You followed silence. And silence is a choice." Elaine looked away. Janelle tapped her phone, dialed. "Yes, this is Carter. Activate hold status on Charter 911. Reason, policy discrepancy under internal audit." A short pause. "Confirmed," the voice replied. She ended the call, then glanced at Chloe. "I've paused the flight." A ripple went through the room. Elaine looked stunned. "You don't have that?" Janelle raised one hand, not to interrupt, just to finish. "Authority?" she asked gently. "Are you sure about that?" The plane's engines were ready, the doors were unlocked, but the flight wouldn't move. Not because of weather, not because of baggage, because the truth had been spoken. And the woman they tried to erase had just put the entire system on hold. Somewhere in the lounge, someone gasped, not because of what was happening in front of them, but because of what was happening on their screen. A young man in his 20s, sneakers kicked up on a silver suitcase, held up his phone and whispered, "Yo, she's viral." The room didn't quite hear it at first, but then came the whispers. "It's online, they're sharing it." "Wait, that's her?" He turned the screen so his neighbor could see. A TikTok live feed, grainy footage, but clear enough. There was Janelle standing calm, alone, powerful, surrounded by red-faced officials and unsure staff. And at the bottom of the screen, a title, bold and sharp, "Black CEO blocked from boarding private flight." And she just paused the plane. The video was barely 4 minutes long, but it had already passed 40,000 shares, and growing. Chloe's work tablet buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her whole face changed. "They know," she whispered. Darius leaned over. "Who does?" "Nova Sky," she said. "They just sent an internal warning to everyone. No one's allowed to speak to the press. No comments, no replies, just silence." She looked up. "They're watching this unfold right now, and they're scared." Outside the gate room, Elaine answered her phone on the third ring. Her voice, usually sharp, was now rushed, uneven. "What do you mean it's on Twitter?" A pause. "No, we haven't boarded her. I told you she's being non-compliant. She's questioning process." Another pause. Her eyes flicked toward the window, toward Janelle, who stood still like a judge on a battlefield. Elaine lowered her voice. "She's not raising her voice, no, she's just standing there." Silence on the other end. Then Elaine hissed, "I don't care what her connections are. She's not above protocol." Click. She turned, smoothed her blazer, re-entered the room, but she didn't speak. She just walked. Quieter. One by one, the passengers in the lounge shifted. Then someone stood. It was the older gentleman in the tan jacket with his reading glasses perched on his nose. "I've seen enough," he said, loud enough to carry. "If this plane leaves without her, I'm staying behind." Gasps. Another woman, sleek suit, laptop still open, stood too. "This isn't about rules," she said. "It's about how they're enforced and who they're enforced on." Then the woman in the red shawl nodded. "Count me out of this flight." It wasn't an uproar. It was something heavier. Conviction. Janelle said nothing. She didn't need to. But her phone rang, a private number, no caller ID. She answered. Calm, a smooth voice. Female, precise, came through. "Ms. Carter, I'm calling on behalf of Nova Sky Executive Services. We're monitoring the situation." Janelle didn't interrupt. "We understand things have escalated, and we'd like to resolve this quietly before reputational harm occurs." Janelle tilted her head slightly. "It already has." The voice hesitated. "We're prepared to offer expedited rebooking, a private suite, and a written apology, if that helps bring closure." Janelle smiled. But it wasn't the kind of smile that ends a conversation. It was the kind that opens a new one. "I don't do silence," she said. "And I don't do backstage deals." She hung up. Chloe was still at the counter when Elaine turned to her. "You're with her now?" Elaine asked. Her voice cracked at the end, not angry but tired. Chloe looked up, and for the first time that day, she didn't look away. "I'm with what's right," she said quietly, but with no room for confusion. Elaine didn't reply. Couldn't. She just sat down. The trending page didn't start a revolution. It simply showed one that was already happening. A woman erased, a seat denied, and now, a system cracking in public view. In the next chapter, the gloves come off, and Ms. Carter shows them who they tried to play. The call came in quietly. Not a loud ringtone, not some urgent ping, just a soft vibration in Janelle's palm, steady, calm, like it already knew she would answer. She lifted the phone, pressed it to her ear. "Yes?" A man's voice, polite to the edge of panic, came through. "Ms. Carter, this is Marcus Landon, Vice President of Executive Operations at Nova Sky." He paused, almost as if waiting for permission to keep going. "We've been made aware of the situation. First, please accept our sincere apology. This should never have happened." Janelle said nothing. "Your boarding has been fully reinstated. We're prepared to dispatch a senior liaison immediately and—" She interrupted, calm, measured. "I will board," she said, "but not as a passenger." Silence. Then, just before the call dropped, "Yes, understood." She turned off the screen, slipped the phone into her coat pocket. Then she looked up, not toward the staff, not toward the passengers, but toward the front of the gate. She walked. One step, then another, and the room went completely still. Elaine tried to stand straighter, as if she could somehow reassert control just by posture, but Janelle stopped in front of her. No fury, no fire, just truth. "I'm Janelle Carter," she said softly. "Co-founder, chairwoman, Nova Sky Aviation." It didn't land like a punch, it landed like a slow, low tremor, something shifting under everyone's feet. Elaine blinked. "What?" Janelle didn't repeat it. She didn't have to. One of the passengers gasped, quietly. "Wait, she owns this airline?" The businessman in the tan jacket sat back in his seat, whistling under his breath. "Well, damn!" Halstead's tablet slid from her hand and landed with a soft thud on the desk. Chloe looked at Janelle, eyes wide. You're her... Janelle gave a small nod. Yes. Then she turned to Chloe fully. I need you to check something for me, she said. Use your admin login. Confirm my executive override is still active. Chloe swallowed, then tapped quickly on her screen. A beat passed. Then she looked up. Her voice was small, but certain. You have full override access. Janelle smiled. Not wide, not smug, just satisfied. Thank you. Elaine stepped back. One step, then two, like the truth was pushing her. From the back, Darius called out, Why didn't you say who you were earlier? Janelle turned, meeting his eyes. Because power doesn't matter, she said, until they show you what they think you don't have. Silence followed. The kind of silence where people aren't just listening, they're learning. Chloe's screen lit up again. She read the notification aloud, breath catching in her throat. Internal broadcast. Nova Sky just sent a company-wide memo. Ms. Carter has been fully reinstated. An investigation is underway. Elaine closed her eyes, like she'd been holding on to something that had just let go. Janelle looked at her, not with revenge, not with scorn, just finality. You didn't have to like me, she said, but you did have to respect the seat I paid for. She turned to face the rest of the room. To everyone here, thank you. Not for taking sides, but for seeing what was in front of you. Her voice didn't rise. It settled, solid as truth. She didn't storm the system. She didn't scream for attention. She simply stood still and let the walls collapse around her. In the next chapter, Nova Sky bends, and the woman they tried to block gives the final command. The plane was ready, engines humming, cabin crew in place, cockpit lit like a small city at midnight, but the door remained open and no one was moving. At the front of the lounge, Janelle Carter stood, not blocking, not arguing, just thinking. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Nova Sky HQ. Executive transport available, crew is standing by, we await your instructions. She didn't reply. She looked at the plane, then at the people in the room, then back at the plane, and she said quietly, Let the plane wait. Elaine opened her mouth to protest, but there was no sound, no power left. Chloe stepped forward, glancing at Janelle. Do you want to board now? Janelle turned to her. No, she said gently. Not yet. The room watched in silence as Janelle reached into her bag, pulled out a slim leather folder, and handed it to Chloe. Inside is the original memo I sent 3 weeks ago, warning about bias in internal booking prioritizations. It was flagged, ignored, and buried. Chloe's fingers gripped the folder like it was heavier than it looked. Deliver that to compliance, Janelle said. Tonight, not tomorrow. Chloe nodded, almost trembling. Yes, ma'am. Behind them, the main lounge screen flickered. A message pushed remotely. Large white letters against a navy ghoul background. Nova Sky Aviation acknowledges and regrets the incident on Flight NS9011. A full investigation is underway. Our deepest apologies to Chairwoman Janelle Carter. A gasp from someone, maybe several people at once. Halstead sank slowly into the chair behind the desk. Elaine turned her back to the room, staring out the glass window, as if the tarmac could erase the last hour. It didn't. The older man in the tan jacket approached Janelle slowly. Miss Carter, he said, clearing his throat. I owe you an apology. She turned to him, curious. I watched it all, he said. And I didn't say anything until I was sure you were somebody. He paused. But the truth is, you were always somebody, and I should have known that wouldn't require a title. Janelle looked at him, then offered her hand. Thank you for saying it, she replied. He nodded, and something in the air let go. Darius whispered to Chloe, I've never seen a company bend this fast. Chloe answered without looking up. That's what happens when the person you tried to erase owns the eraser." The pilot stepped out of the jet, approached Janelle carefully. "Ma'am, we're ready when you are." She smiled. "Stand by." Then she turned to the passengers. "All of you are welcome to board. I won't stop this flight. But I need one thing first." Everyone waited. "I need Nova Skies to rebuild what they broke, not just for me, but for anyone who's ever been quietly turned away without a camera, without a voice, without a title." She paused. "That begins tonight." Chloe looked at her tablet. "Orders just came through," she said. "New protocol review, system-wide, starting now." Janelle exhaled deeply. Finally, she walked toward the window, looked at the jet again. It wasn't just a plane anymore. It was a lesson. And for once, the lesson wasn't going to take off without being learned. She didn't just reclaim her seat. She made the entire airline pause. Not for her ego, not for revenge, but because dignity should never be optional, and silence should never be protocol. And that's why the plane waited. 1 week later, Nova Sky held a press conference. No banners, no spotlight, no applause. Just a plain podium, a quiet mic, and a room full of reporters who weren't used to seeing a corporation flinch. Janelle Carter wasn't there. She didn't need to be. She'd stood long enough. Instead, she sat in a sunlit room, a coffee cup in one hand and her laptop in front of her, reviewing the implementation schedule for the very reforms she'd just signed into action that morning. Every flight, private or commercial, would now require identity confirmation by encrypted ID, not just visual guesswork. Every ground staff member would complete mandatory training in implicit bias and respectful conflict resolution. And passenger complaints? They'd go through an independent review board outside the operational chain of command. It wasn't a statement. It was a system change. And that's how she preferred things to end. Elaine Prescott resigned quietly. No press release. No final quote. Just gone. Chloe Daniels, promoted. Now consulting on system-wide operations reform, Halstead was reassigned. This time to internal quality control, reporting directly to Nova Sky's legal and ethics team. As for Flight N9111, it took off 3 hours late, but every passenger remembered exactly why. About a week later, a post began circulating on LinkedIn. No name attached, just a headline. "I watched a black woman get erased, and then I watched her make the whole system remember her." Janelle read it that Saturday morning. She smiled. Not wide, not smug, just full. Her phone rang, numbers she knew by heart. "Hey, baby," came a familiar voice. Her aunt from Atlanta, the one who once sent her to summer camp on a bus because they couldn't afford the plane. "I'm proud of you," she said. "But what makes me proudest? You didn't shout. You didn't cuss, you didn't cry. You just stood there and made the whole world look." Later that evening, Janelle opened an old file on her desktop. It was dated from her first year launching Nova Sky. The title? "Who Gets to Fly?" She scrolled to the bottom, typed one final line. "Now, they know." Justice doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives in the stillness. A gaze that won't drop, a name that won't be erased, a woman who won't back down, until the system finally learns to see her. And that's why the plane waited. If you're still listening, I just want to say thank you, not just for making it to the end of this story, but for carrying it with you. Because this wasn't just about a flight. It was about how often black women are expected to shrink, to be quiet, to not make it worse, even when we're the ones being wronged. Janelle didn't scream. She didn't beg. She stood still and let the system reveal itself. And I hope that if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated, this story reminds you that your name matters, your presence matters, and your silence should never be anyone else's comfort. Now, I would love to hear from you. Was there a moment in this story that made you pause? that reminded you of something personal? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk. And if this story moved you in any way, please subscribe, hit that bell icon, and share this episode with someone who needs to feel seen today. You're not alone, and your voice still here, still rising.